Welcome into Eye on Northeast Kansas, the podcast. I'm your host, Melissa Bruner. Pleased to be back with you here as we had a brief hiatus for our podcast version, but we are back recapping those top guests that you're hearing on Eye on Northeast Kansas, the TV show. It streams to you live 4 p.m. Central Time, Monday through Friday from our WIBW TV studios in Topeka, Kansas. And Topeka continues to be digging out as we start this new year from 14 inches of snow. Some parts of Northeast Kansas actually saw more than that. And boy, the city of Topeka has been under fire for how it has handled the clearing, particularly of residential streets in the wake of this huge snowfall. What seemed to really set people off was when the city said it would clear the residential streets. That was great. But then they came out a couple days later and said they had completed a pass through all residential streets. Residents said, "We don't think so. We can show you the video. We can show you the evidence that a plow has not been down our street at all." So the city was called to task for that, and Topeka City Manager Perez visited Eye on Northeast Kansas and addressed and responded to residents' complaints. Here's what he had to say. Thank you for coming in. Appreciate this. This is your regularly scheduled monthly time, right, but it is very important that you are here today because I think a lot of people are wondering about the city and its snow response. But let's get updated today. Where do we stand today in getting things cleaned up and taken care of? Right,
so as of today, our crews completed their 24-hour operations with enhanced crew members. Since last Saturday, they had been working 24 hours on 12-hour shifts. And so this past weekend, I know that we really hit it hard as far as trying to make multiple passes across all neighborhood residential streets. Did a fantastic job. So I definitely have to take my hat off for the crews. Definitely responded to we didn't just do proactive passing of our residential streets, but as calls came in, as our council members who were also very responsive to the community got concerns from the community, they passed them along to us. And this past weekend, as of Saturday, I basically told the teams, hey, our goal is to ensure that everybody can get safely to school and to work this morning. So as of 7 a.m., we've concluded our 24-hour operations, and we're back down to our regular daytime and nighttime crews, still treating streets. Regardless of how many passes we did on some streets, there's definitely going to have to be some expectation from the community that there's still going to be some patches of packed ice or snow on some of those residential streets, because once you get a hard packed ice down, it takes a little bit of time. It takes some of that Mother Nature's Jeremy mentioned, as well as the de-icing treatment that we put down. So regardless of how many times we can run a plow over a street, there's still probably over the next few days going to be some patches of ice.
You mentioned the frustrations, the concerns, and the questions. Mm-hmm. And so I'd like you to respond to that, because I think the tipping point for many people is that they understood this was an out-of-the-norm snowstorm. They understood that it was going to take time. But I think the statement that got people upset last week was when they were told, we have touched every residential street once, right, when clearly you could see in their photos, in our video, that they had not had a plow go down them.
Right.
Was that a misstatement now, that you now realize it was a misstatement, or do you stand by that everything had been seen?
So what I will say is this: we have 14 work zones that we worked on east to west. And I will tell you, as of Thursday afternoon, Friday morning, we'd worked through all of those work zones. Our goal was to touch every street within those work zones. Obviously, as soon as we made that statement that we had touched every street, definitely heard back from the community that may have not have been the case. And so for any misstatements, for any misrepresentations of anything, I will apologize for those statements. I will tell you that as we did receive that feedback from the public, we prioritize those areas, not just with field visits, but as far as the actual treatments. And again, I got to see where we would put down a plow. We'd plow it, nothing would come up because it's hard packed ice. But just because we didn't plow doesn't mean that it wasn't treated. We would still, during each of those passes, we would still put down de-icing material. So to say that, hey, we made 100% of all the streets, obviously, getting some of the feedback that may have not been the case. And again, apologies for that.
What have we learned from this? Because what were the breakdowns? We've learned that the normal, even the city truck tracking mechanism was not functioning. What was happening with the contractors? What have we learned that perhaps can improve this for the next time we have a major response like this?
Yeah, so Saturday morning when I went into the street ops team, again, having the question called on us, hey, like, did we touch every street? I mean, for me, it went down to the basics, like, hey, print out some paper maps, and as the crews are making their passes through the streets, call it in, highlight it, done, at least so that we know for certain. Now, one of the challenges that we did run into is that our contractors didn't have the radios to directly communicate with us. So a lot of it had to be relayed to their supervisors and then to our teams. So definitely having a mechanism to track all of that electronically is definitely something that we want to evaluate. I'll tell you, the teams today, there's a couple of things that happened today. The teams today have, they were interviewing with technology groups that could help us get that technology. Something as simple as being able to plug something into a cigarette lighter. If we have a contractor on board, that they could do that. And it'll tell us if a blade is up, a blade's down, how much material is being distributed.
So next time you'll know what's missed.
Yeah.
For a fact. You'll have it right in front of you.
Right. And then, again, too, we did get some of the concerns. Hey, like, they went down the street, the blade was up. Well, yeah, I mean, again, maybe they went down and putting down a blade wasn't going to pick up the packed ice. But again, as they're passing through there, they're deploying de-icing material. So, I mean, that, and then also too, last week when we tried to, we basically tried to get more resources available. We had one contractor who had responded to an RFP that we previously had put out. And so today we submitted an RFP, request for proposals for more contractual help. I will tell you Thursday night, probably about 9 o'clock or so, because again, seeing a lot of lawn contractors with plows on their vehicles, I was like, hey, maybe they can come help us. And so Thursday night, I saw one I just Googled and saw one that was open 24 hours, called them, and I was like, hey, can we hire you to help us work on some of our streets? And they're like, well, we're busy with our own private.
They were backed up as well.
Right.
Yeah. Well, City Manager Robert Perez, appreciate you coming in, explaining that, talking through what's happening from here. We do know the city crews were working very hard. Nobody disputes that. The communication piece of it, I appreciate you explaining that, and we thank your workers and hope they are going to get some rest now as we continue working through. Thank you so much. Mother Nature isn't helping with a whole lot of this melting away of the snow, folks, so we are going to be continuing to deal with this issue for a while, and we're dealing with it as Kansas lawmakers return to town. The Kansas legislative session is underway. Before the gavel sounded, we invited legislative leadership to our studios to kind of look ahead to the session, share their thoughts on how things will move forward. Let's start with the leader of the Kansas House Republicans, Speaker of the House, Dan Hawkins. Hard to believe it's just right around the corner, isn't it?
It has. It's been a fast trip to this point. It's getting busy.
What has been this pre-session time like for you? You have new faces, returning faces, all coming in.
Yeah, once the election was over, it was really just kind of a mad dash, kind of getting everybody ready for the session, getting the session up and running as far as our all the things that we have to do to start session. So that's always a busy time. We still have things to do. This week's a real busy week getting ready for next Monday, but I think we're going to be ready.
Just making sure everybody has an office and a place to sit and pens and paper and all that stuff.
Oh yeah, and offices and seats on the floor is a big deal. So,
what is the top issue on your agenda? Where does the priority lie for you this
session?
The
top issue this year, Melissa, is really property taxes. As we campaigned across the state, it really didn't matter what part of the state we were in. The main issue that people talked about at the door was property tax. And property tax is very high. And everybody got their property tax bill back in late November. We had to pay by December 20th. Mine was 15% increase. And I don't know how that really stacks up against other parts of the state, but 15% increase is a pretty good increase, and so people are feeling it.
We have heard from local leaders, local government leaders, that really this lies with the legislature to fix the situation. The state mill levy is only part of the story, and much of that goes toward education. The other half of it is how property valuations are arrived at. And local government officials say that that falls to state lawmakers to do something about, because they are hampered by what they are required to do from yours. So for example, market valuations, when we saw market values soar, we saw all of our values soar. Now that inflation has slowed down, I'm not really seeing my property tax valuation go down at all.
No, and so that's one thing I started really researching. And the property valuation is done by a formula. And so I went to research just last week and said, can you give me some research showing how property valuations compare to sales prices? And it was really astonishing to me. Most of the state, the actual appraised value is still about 10% under market value. So property valuation is not the problem. The problem is our houses have just went up. Inflation has caused houses to go up. And our property valuation is supposed to be based on market price, how much we can sell our property value or our property for. And even with property valuations going up, they're still underneath what those houses are selling for.
If that's the case, then what do we do? What can the legislature do? If you don't believe that the valuation and appraisal process is the problem, then how do we fix the property tax problem?
And I don't think that it is. I wasn't sure until I did the research, but after seeing the research, I do not think that our system of valuation is wrong. Yeah, I think it's proven to be correct. So now we have to look at, do we do some type of revenue neutral position based on property valuation, to where the amount of revenue collected can't go over a certain amount? I'm not sure what the answer is, but we are working on it. We're talking. I do think we will have a plan before very long in the session to address that. But the idea of doing a constitutional amendment to limit appraised value to 4% has some real unintended consequences that people would not like. And so we got to be careful what we do and make sure that we don't do something that really exacerbates the problem.
Democrats want to push again for Medicaid expansion.
Sure.
Will you allow for a debate on that? Will you encourage debate on that? Or do you believe it's something that's been asked and answered?
Do I believe what?
Has it been asked and answered, debated, studied?
It's been debated every year since 10 years now. For 10 years running, go clear back to 2015 was the first debate. We've had debate after debate after debate. Will it come up again this year? Absolutely. It will come up on the floor, and when it comes up on the floor, they'll get the chance to debate, and it'll probably end up exactly the same way it has every other year, and that is it's not going to go anywhere.
Why don't you support doing something along those lines?
Well, I will tell you that there's a lot of reasons. We could take an hour and a half, and I can't sum it up in 2 minutes, but I can tell you there's a lot of really big reasons, and one is, and I think you're going to see it really soon in the Trump administration, they have to cut spending. And where are they going to cut it? They're going to cut it in Medicaid. And when they cut it, they're going to drop that 90-10 match down to a 60-40 match. That would cost us about $500 million to do that. And I guarantee you we don't have $500 million to spend year over year over year. That'll put us in the hole within 2 short years.
On the other side of the aisle, the House has a new Democratic leader this year. He is Representative Brandon Woodard. He joined us for his thoughts. You actually are from Topeka, so welcome home.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So what are you looking most forward to as we start the 2025 session?
I'm looking forward to addressing a lot of the concerns that we heard from voters across the state last year. Leading the Democratic caucus, I'm excited to, of course, stand up for our issues, but everyone heard about cost of living and housing affordability, and I think that we have a really good potential for addressing that in the upcoming legislative session.
How long have you been in the House?
I just got elected to my 4th term. So
your 4th term. You're replacing a veteran. Vic Miller had run for the state Senate. He was defeated in the primaries. So this is brand new for the Democrats. We are hearing a lot of headlines about how the Republicans have retained the supermajority. How do you plan to, not necessarily, I don't want to say counteract because that kind of sounds negative. How do you plan to turn this into a positive and reach across the aisle?
Yeah, so several members of our caucus were there when there was only 28 of us. We have 37 now. And for the 6 years that I've been there, we've been in the super minority, but that hasn't stopped us from working across the aisle to get solutions done for Kansans. So, we will stand up and oppose bad policy when we need to, but otherwise we'll work with the Republican caucus to get good policy done and across the finish line and have the governor sign it into law.
One thing that Democrats in particular and the governor have focused on is trying to get that Medicaid expansion passed. What approach do you have to hopefully be able to get a vote? Because I'm sure that you hope that it can get to the floor for debate at least and get a vote on that.
Yeah, Medicaid expansion is the moral thing to do. The budget, as we look out into the off years, is getting a little bit tight, and expansion is something that would bring in federal resources, federal dollars into the state to help us pay for that. So we're going to continue fighting for that. We've been able to have a floor vote, even if it's just on the budget, all 6 years that I've been there. So I look forward to at least having that floor debate during the budget. But otherwise, we're going to continue working with leadership to get health care for the Kansans that need it.
What is the key radar that you think is maybe, or the key issue that's kind of flying under the radar that you'd like to see get some attention this year?
Oh, that's putting me on the spot there. I mentioned the cost of living. I think housing affordability is something that we're going to be able to tackle. It's long overdue, and as we continue to grow across the state, it's a really important issue that we have to tackle.
A lot of the cities have been lobbying, cities and counties, to reform how valuations are done. They say, you know what, if folks are complaining about that, that is something that needs to be addressed at the state level. Can you see that happening? What would you like to see done?
Yeah, I think we have to do our part. If we're asking the counties and cities to look at their own mill levy, we have to do the same at the state level as well. But we want to definitely, we've had in the past property tax lids, which actually had negative consequences of the budget might have been at a place where they could reduce the mill levy, but they didn't because they wouldn't be able to raise it back up. So we have to look at whatever solution it is, something that's a true partnership between the state, city, and counties so that we can provide that sort of relief that Kansans need.
Of course, the legislative session is slated to last 90 days. Leadership wants to be done by mid-April. We'll be following along and see how they do. At the federal level, of course, the new Congress has convened in the state of Kansas. The 2nd Congressional District has a new face representing us in Washington, D.C. It is former Kansas Attorney General Derek Schmidt. Before he took his oath in Congress, he visited us in the studio. You've been here in many capacities, but this is a brand new title for you.
It is. It's great to be back and grateful for the opportunity to serve in a new way and looking forward to it.
I feel like I should ask you about a consumer protection issue from your time as Attorney General when you used to visit with Ralph. But is there a change in your mind between serving in the state of Kansas and serving in our nation's capital?
Well, sure, it's a different role. It's all public service, and it's the same people I'll be representing in the 2nd District, and I'm very grateful for that opportunity. But it is a different role. Now we're part of the federal government decision-making process. It's a legislative and advocacy role as opposed to an executive and administrative role as you have in the Attorney General's office for Kansas. So there's a little bit of a different mindset, but ultimately it's all public service. It's trying to make this remarkable system of government that we have work the way people expect it to work. That's our objective.
Do you feel like you'll have a little faster learning curve? Because sometimes with freshman representatives, there is a concern that it's going to take a while to get up to speed. You're not going to have the clout, the influence. How do you hope to perhaps accelerate that because of your prior experience as an Attorney General and working with attorneys general across the nation?
Well, I think it does help. I've had the chance to spend some time with some of my other new colleagues, both incoming colleagues. We have about 30 Republicans and about 30 Democrats, brand new like me, coming in this cycle. And then, of course, a number of folks who are already there and gotten to know a few of them. Each of us brings our own perspective. That's the way the system is set up. And I'll be the only former state attorney general in the House of Representatives. So I think that's a unique perspective that I hope is going to be beneficial. Give me a sort of a unique voice in advocating on some issues for Kansans. So, we all play the hand that we're dealt. And I've been very blessed to have different roles of serving Kansans.
What's priority one for you going in?
Yeah, I haven't changed from where I was on the campaign. I think 1, 2, and 3. Number 1 is we've got to get the southern border secured and get our arms around this migration crisis. I think one thing that is a little bit new out in the public discussion that wasn't quite as front and center 3 months ago when we were campaigning on it. Even the New York Times reported recently that we are living through the largest single wave of migration to the United States in the history of this country. It is more people and it is a larger percentage of our population than it has ever been before, even larger than the waves in the late 19th and early 20th century. Now that's not inherently good or bad, but I think it does explain why there's been so much sort of trepidation and focus and unease around the broader issue that's always present. And 60% of the people who have come in this enormous wave have come here in violation of the laws of the United States. That's unprecedented. So we have to get our arms around it. That's job one.
There is a lot of fear surrounding that topic, though. On the campaign trail, you expressed support for now incoming President Trump, hope that you would be working with a Trump administration.
Absolutely.
But there's a lot of fear that I imagine you acknowledge you hear that fear. From some of the comments that have been made, that we may actually be looking at mass deportation, and not just people who are here in the U.S. recently, illegally, but also some who've been here for many years, perhaps some who've been trying to go to the process, that there may be these door-to-door people being deported. Where do you stand on that, and how do you hope to mitigate that fear?
Well, look, I think we start with the proposition we're going to enforce the laws of the United States. You don't start couching and hedging on that before you even begin the process. We have about 1.5 million people here who either already have gone through the process, had their due process in its entirety, and have been ordered by a judge to leave the country, yet they're still here, or they've committed deportable violent crimes and they've been convicted of that. That is a very large group of people. Let's start on that. Surely we can all agree that that is reasonable and necessary, and then we'll see where we go, but that's going to keep us plenty busy for a while.
How do you reach across the aisle and try to make some common ground on those sorts of issues, and issues such as women's health, when we talk about the fear surrounding that, what rights, what access people might have?
Yeah, I think personal relationships really matter on any issue when you're trying to work across the aisle. I was always a huge fan of Senator Dole's. I think he did a remarkable job of both being an effective advocate. He was a conservative Republican. He never yielded on his principles. And yet he was able to make the system work. He worked with Democrats from time to time, worked with Republicans from all over the country with different points of view. And I think that's a useful model for all of us. Never waver on the principles. I was at a freshman gathering, an orientation type of meeting a few weeks ago, and had a visit with an incoming House member from California, from one of the metro areas in California. Very, very different life experience. She was born to drug-addicted parents. She was a drug addict herself before she ran for the House, and obviously got dried out and is now serving, comes in as a Democrat, a very different worldview from my own. But we agreed we were both passionate on the subject of dealing with addiction and its consequences in our communities, and agreed we're going to try to find a way to work together and make some progress on it. I think that's how you sort of move ahead.
Well, how often will we expect to see you back? How can people get in touch with you when you move to Washington?
Right, well, I'll be back most weekends, not literally every weekend, but most weekends and during recesses. So we'll be around. Hope we get a chance to come back and visit with you again.
We'll hold you to that.
And we will have a new office with a new address starting a week from today, January 3rd, when the swearing in is, 1223 Longworth House Office Building, and we'll get it up on the web for everyone to find. Come on out and see us, give us a holler.
Just knock on your door, right?
Anytime. That's what we're there for.
Congressman-elect Derek Schmidt, good luck to you, and we will have you back here from time to time and catch up.
Thanks so much, Melissa, and Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you.
Finally, on the podcast, I want to share with you a conversation I had with a woman, an author who is from Manhattan, Kansas originally. She went on to become a journalist and worked in Washington, D.C. She also attends the church where former President Jimmy Carter attended when he was president in the White House. She said it's within walking distance of the White House. And she said Jimmy Carter didn't just attend the church there. He also took time while he was in office to teach some adult Sunday school classes. The recordings of some of those sessions were uncovered. She got to listen to them, has turned them into a book. She told us about the experience.
Christi Harlan shared her thoughts with me.
When I was born, my mother was a bookkeeper for the Manhattan Mercury. And the family legend is that one of the men who worked on the printing press came to visit me in the hospital and touched my forehead and left a dot of newspaper ink. I knew from the minute I went to college that I wanted to be a newspaper reporter, and there's no better place in the world to be a reporter than Washington, D.C. It was the Mecca. And I moved here in January 1993, when President Clinton was sworn in, and joined the First Baptist Church.
So is that how you started hearing of kind of the legend of President Carter and his involvement there? And then how did the your involvement and interest just kind of evolve?
Yeah, I just kind of knew in the back of my mind, it was just kind of talked about casually that President Jimmy Carter had attended First Baptist Church and maybe taught some Sunday school lessons. And when he went into hospice care in February of 2023, the old reporter in me said, let's go see what's in the church archives. And that's when I found 14 recordings of the Sunday school lessons he taught while he was in the White House.
And we don't have enough faith sometimes to say, well, can I really get this peace in the face of all my problems and all my worries and all my doubts and tribulations? But Paul is saying that you can.
The man took time from his day job to come a mile north of the White House. The church is within walking distance. In fact, President Harry Truman, when he was in the White House, frequently walked to First Baptist. But President Carter took it a step further. 3 days after his inauguration in January 1977, he joined First Baptist Church with his wife Rosalind, his son Chip. Daughter Amy presented herself for baptism. That was the start of their 4-year life with First Baptist of DC.
How important, especially now, was it to find those recordings of lessons that he taught? How special is that?
Melissa, it was a combination of the old reporter in me knowing I had found a good story, but also feeling what I think a lot of reporters feel is our responsibility to the public. And these recordings, the other material I learned about the Carters from the church archives, I couldn't let it just sit in the archives. I needed to publish. I needed to get it to the public and share the story of this remarkable man and this little known bit of history about him.
What has it been like this week? You were telling me you've been at the church, you've been visiting with people who I imagine want to be in the places where President Carter had a presence. What have some of those interactions been like, and what is the spirit around the church this week?
Visitors have come from all over the country to listen to the recordings that we're playing in the church. And we have tissues, boxes of tissues set on each of the pews in the church, because I've watched many, many people come to tears when they hear the voice of Jimmy Carter teaching a Sunday school lesson.
What is the lasting legacy and message for you as one who has listened to all of these recordings and really researched the story and written books about what you have heard?
The two biggest things that come across to me is that here was a man with an incredibly difficult day job who took time every Sunday to ground himself in his faith, to take the time to be reflective and set a course for doing good in the week ahead. And the other thing that I haven't heard come across in many of the tributes this week, Jimmy Carter came to church with a wicked good sense of humor. And I have enjoyed learning that part about our 39th president, that he was funny. And I'm glad to be able to share that.
Just a fascinating conversation as she was in Washington and had a front row seat to the final farewells to President Jimmy Carter. Remember, you can see all of our guests, all the video of our guests who've been on Eye on Northeast Kansas when you check WIBW.com. I also post them on my Facebook page, WIBW Melissa Bruner, along with our studio selfies, so you can get a little behind-the-scenes look at our guests in the studio with us. Until next time, we'll see you on the Red Couch.